I still remember the way the maple leaves swirled outside our living room window. They danced like they knew something I didn't, like they were trying to tell me goodbye before I even knew how to say it. I was 6 years old that fall, and our home was filled with the scent of cinnamon, vanilla, and something I've never smelled since: the warmth of my mother's laughter. She always hummed when she baked, not quite on tune, but sweet in a way only a child could love. I stood on a little step stool beside her at the counter, my hands sticky with cookie dough. "Too much flour, honey," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "But don't worry, that's what makes them special." I didn't know she was tired. I thought all grown-ups sat down so much. I thought everyone whispered in kitchens and closed doors behind them. I didn't notice how her voice had grown softer, or how she winced when she bent to pick up the measuring cups. To me, she was still Mom, strong and endless. On Saturdays, we raked leaves together. She'd let me jump into the piles once we were done, pretending to be annoyed when I undid all our work. "You little rascal," she'd say, scooping me up and spinning me until we both collapsed into giggles. That porch became our playground, her laughter our soundtrack. One afternoon, after brushing my hair and telling me a story about how the stars learned to shine, she leaned in and said, "Draw me something special tonight, okay?" I took that seriously. I drew a picture of our family, Mom, Dad, and me, holding hands under a tree with red leaves. I placed it under her pillow before I went to sleep. That was the last night I saw her awake. The next morning, the house smelled like rain instead of cookies. Dad sat at the kitchen table staring into his coffee. He didn't say anything when I asked where Mom had gone. He just pulled me onto his lap, buried his face into my shoulder, and held me tighter than he ever had. For days, he moved through the house like a ghost. Nana Evelyn came over with casseroles and warm hugs, whispering things I didn't understand. She smelled like rosewater and peppermints and always had tissues tucked into her sleeves. I caught her crying once in Mom's bedroom, clutching a scarf to her chest. When she noticed me, she knelt down and said, "Your mama loved you more than the moon loves the tide." I didn't really know what that meant, but I nodded anyway. I kept asking when Mom would be home, when she'd come back from the hospital, or from heaven, or wherever everyone kept saying she was now. "You said heaven is where angels live," I told Dad one night as I climbed into his lap. "So, when's she coming back?" He pressed his lips to my hair and let out a trembling breath. "I don't know, baby," he whispered. "I just don't know." After that, I stopped asking, but I started listening more, to the silence, to the spaces where her laugh used to echo, to the way the house creaked in the middle of the night like it missed her, too. Dad tried. I could tell he was trying. He made grilled cheese that always came out too crispy and helped me with my reading, even though he didn't pronounce the words the same way Mom did. But mostly, he went to work early and came home late, and I learned to tiptoe around him. The cookies disappeared from the kitchen. So did the music. Her things were slowly packed into boxes I wasn't allowed to open, stacked neatly in the garage beside the rake we used together. One day, I snuck in and opened one. Her scarf still smelled like her, lavender and brown sugar. I held it to my face and cried until my nose hurt. Weeks passed. Leaves turned to mush under the rain, and the trees stood bare like they were grieving with me. I stopped jumping in leaf piles. It didn't feel fun anymore. Then, one evening, Dad came home early. He had a strange look on his face. Not quite happy, not quite nervous, just different. I was sitting at the dining table coloring with broken crayons when he cleared his throat. "Rachel," he said, smoothing the front of his shirt. "We have a guest tonight." I looked up. "This is Melanie," he continued as a woman stepped into the room. She wore shiny boots and smelled like perfume and lemons. Her smile was wide, practiced. "She's going to have dinner with us." I looked down at my drawing. A stick figure family under the same red tree. But now, there were only 2 people holding hands. And just like that, autumn felt colder than it ever had before. Melanie moved in the way a breeze might slip through a cracked window. Quiet, perfumed, and almost too polite. She smiled a lot at first, said "sweetheart" in a way that didn't quite reach her eyes. I wasn't sure what to make of her. She wore high heels inside the house and laughed at things Dad said that weren't funny. At first, I thought maybe it would be okay. Maybe she'd bring back the music or the smell of cookies. Maybe Dad would smile more. And he did, but not at me. It started small. The first picture to disappear was the one on the mantel. Me and Mom in matching aprons, covered in flour. I noticed it missing the same day Melanie brought over a framed photo of herself and Dad at a company picnic. "You two look so good together," she said, placing it right in the center. I asked Dad about the missing photo. He said it must have been moved. I checked the drawers. It wasn't there. Then came the pillows, the ones with little embroidered flowers Mom had sewn. Melanie said they were too fussy for the living room and replaced them with sleek gray ones. The living room started to feel like a waiting room, quiet, clean, and not meant to be touched. My room was next. One Saturday, I came home from Nana's to find my walls a pale cream color. My posters were gone. So were my stuffed animals. Dust collectors, Melanie called them. "You're not a baby anymore, Rachel. Time to grow up." She handed me a checklist. Make your bed. Fold laundry. Empty dishwasher. "Every young lady should learn discipline," she told me with a wink. "We'll make something fine out of you yet." I didn't remember being asked. The house rules went up on the fridge in neat handwriting. No loud play. Lights out at 8. No TV after dinner. Dishes washed and dried immediately. I stood staring at the list like it was written in a language I no longer spoke. At dinner, I reached for the salt too quickly and knocked over a glass. It clattered, but didn't break. Melanie's lips tightened. "Rachel, we use our manners at the table." Dad said nothing, eyes fixed on his plate. One evening, I heard their voices behind the closed bedroom door. I wasn't trying to listen, but the hallway was narrow and their words sharp. "She's not adjusting," Melanie said. "It's awkward, John. Maybe she'd be better off living with your mother. Evelyn's always going on about wanting her around." A long pause. "I can't," Dad said quietly. "I made a promise to Sarah." The silence after that felt heavier than anything I'd ever heard. The next day, Melanie rearranged the family photo wall. Every frame with Mom in it disappeared. New ones, vacations I hadn't been part of, dinner parties I didn't remember, took their place. I asked Nana about it when she came by one Sunday. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Funny," she said, running her fingers along an empty spot on the shelf. "Seems like some memories are easier to lose than others." After that, her visits got fewer. She said she was giving space. I didn't know who had asked for it. Sometimes I ate dinner alone. Melanie said Dad had late meetings. Other times I'd finish cleaning up and walk past their door, only to hear the low hum of the TV and their laughter. I'd sit on the floor in my room, the lights off, and trace the outline of a small blanket Mom had made, pale blue with tiny stitched daisies. I wasn't supposed to have it anymore. Melanie had packed it into a box labeled "Donate," but I'd taken it back. One afternoon, everything changed again. We were all in the kitchen, the table still cluttered with grocery bags. Melanie pulled out a small square envelope and waved it. "Well," she said, placing it gently in front of Dad, "looks like we're adding to the family." He stared at it, then looked at her with an expression I hadn't seen in years. Joy. Unfiltered and full. "Are you serious?" he asked. She nodded, placing a hand on her stomach. "I took the test this morning." Dad stood up and hugged her, spinning her slightly in the cramped kitchen. He laughed. Out loud. A real laugh. I sat at the table and stared at the crumbs from breakfast. They didn't even look at me. That night, I opened the closet and reached for the blanket. I folded it carefully and placed it in a shoebox beneath my winter clothes. Tucked beside it was the picture I'd drawn for Mom years ago. The colors had faded, but we were still holding hands under the tree. I pressed my palm to the paper as if I could step back into it just for a moment. When Ashley was born, the house was filled with balloons and pastel onesies, and so much laughter I couldn't tell where it was all coming from. Everyone seemed lighter, brighter, like someone had turned the volume up on joy. But somehow, that joy skipped over me. Dad handed me a pink bundle in the hospital hallway. "Meet your baby sister," he whispered, beaming. I held her carefully, her little hands curled into fists, her eyelids fluttering. She smelled like powder and something new, and in that moment, I thought maybe this would be okay. Maybe I'd finally feel like part of something again. But I didn't become a sister. I became help, to hold a baby while warming up bottles, how to rock her just right to stop the crying, how to smile through exhaustion when Melanie said, "You're such a natural, Rachel." I didn't want to be a natural. I wanted to go outside. Field trips came and went. I missed Sarah's birthday party because Melanie had a hair appointment and someone needs to watch Ashley. I stopped signing up for after-school clubs. I stopped asking. The house looked like it belonged to someone else. Walls were now pale yellow with animal decals, kitchen counters cluttered with sterilizers and bottles. My room stayed bland, impersonal, barely mine. Most nights, I sat in the laundry room folding Ashley's clothes, listening to cartoons from the next room while Melanie sipped wine and Dad worked late. Ashley grew into her role like a queen being trained for court. Every time she cried, someone came running. Every time she giggled, someone clapped. But when I cried, Melanie would glance over and ask, "What now?" By the time I was 13, Ashley had learned a powerful trick. Blame. She spilled juice on her birthday dress once, looked at me with that slow, calculating smirk, and ran to Melanie in crocodile tears. "Rachel pushed me," she wailed. I hadn't even been in the same room, but that didn't matter. I was grounded that weekend. My protests were met with cold silence. Dad wouldn't even look at me. Later that week, Ashley broke her musical toy, snapped the little ballerina off the bass, and handed it to Melanie with a pout. "Rachel touched it," she said sweetly. That lie cost me my allowance for a month. I started keeping a notebook. Nothing dramatic, just lists. What happened? Who said what? I didn't know what I'd use it for. Maybe I just wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. One day, Melanie barged into my room, holding up a pair of scissors and the shredded remains of Ashley's dress. "What is the meaning of this?" she snapped, her voice sharp and cold. I stared at her. "I didn't do that." "They were in your backpack," she said, as if that closed the case. Dad walked in then, his expression already weary. "We'll talk later," he said. "Go to your room." Ashley watched from the hallway, thumb in her mouth, eyes glinting. I stayed in my room for 2 days. No one checked on me. When Nana visited the next week, I almost ran into her arms. She made pancakes, extra fluffy, and poured maple syrup the way Mom used to, letting it swirl to the plate's edge. She asked how school was. I lied. Ashley threw a fit when Nana said no to ice cream before dinner. "We eat our dinner first in this house," Nana said firmly, folding her napkin. Ashley stomped. "Mom lets me." "Well, I'm not your mom," Nana said, cool and unshaken. That night, Melanie was furious. "She undermined me," she told Dad. "Your mother has no right." Nana stood tall. "I have every right when I see my granddaughter treated like a second-class citizen." They fought downstairs. I sat at the top of the stairs, knees pulled to my chest, trying not to breathe too loudly. After that, Nana stopped coming around. Melanie said it was for the best. Dad didn't argue. I started eating dinner before they got home. Cereal in silence. I didn't mind. It was quiet, predictable. The worst part wasn't the chores, or the punishments, or the lies. It was the forgetting. Everyone seemed to forget who I used to be. That I had favorite books and liked to sing in the shower. That I used to bake cookies with Mom. That I once got a certificate for reading the most books in 2nd grade. That I wasn't just some shadow on the wall. And maybe I started forgetting too. One night, after Ashley had screamed her way into a new toy and I was cleaning up her spilled snack off the rug, I felt something twist inside me. I didn't say anything. I just stood up, wiped my hands, and walked to the garage. The boxes were still there, dusty now, untouched. I found the one labeled Sarah's Things. I opened it slowly, heart pounding. There, beneath scarves and old photo frames, was a single snapshot. Mom and me, sitting on the back steps, both holding mugs of hot chocolate. I was maybe 5. She was smiling at me like I was the sun. I tucked the photo into my hoodie pocket, carried it back upstairs, and slid it into the shoebox under my bed. If they were going to erase her, I had to remember harder. I wore my cap and gown like armor, stiff and square and slightly too big. The fabric itched at my collar, but I kept my hands still. I stood in a line of blue robes, waiting for my name to be called, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. I found none. Some kids waved to parents holding signs. Some had moms wiping tears with napkins pulled hastily from their purses. My Rao marched forward. I adjusted my tassel, swallowed hard, and walked across the stage alone. The applause was polite, generic, the kind meant for anyone. My name was announced. No one stood. No camera flashed. No one clapped with just a little more love for me. I took my diploma from the principal's hand and walked off the stage like it weighed something more than paper, something closer to expectation. After the ceremony, I lingered by the lockers, hoping maybe they were just late. Maybe Melanie had traffic, or Dad had parked far away. Ashley would probably be texting, unimpressed with the whole thing. But they never came. Taylor Nguyen came up and handed me a small bouquet of daisies. "I saw these at the farmer's market this morning," she said with a smile. "They reminded me of that science project you saved me on." I laughed, a sound too light for how I felt. "Thanks," I whispered. "You didn't have to—" "Rachel," she interrupted gently. "You deserve a whole greenhouse." Her parents waved at us from the parking lot. They'd brought a camera. She posed with me and made sure they got a picture. She said she'd email it later. It would be the only graduation photo I'd ever have. When I got home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Dad was in the kitchen, Melanie sitting beside him with a glass of wine. Ashley was on the couch, scrolling on her phone, legs crossed like she owned the furniture. "There she is," Melanie said, not even looking up. "Congratulations." I stood there, holding my folded gown in one arm and my diploma in the other. "Thanks," I said softly. "Sit." Dad motioned to the chair across from him. "We need to talk." My stomach clenched. Melanie clasped her hands in front of her. "We've been discussing your college plans." My grip on the diploma tightened. Dad wouldn't meet my eyes. "We've decided, well, it makes more sense to put that money toward Ashley's future." "What?" My voice cracked, even though I tried to keep it calm. "She's got such potential," Melanie said smoothly. "And the way tuition costs are rising—" "That money was from Mom," I interrupted. "She saved it for me." Dad rubbed his temple. "Things change, Rachel." "No," I said louder now. "You made a promise to her. You said you'd protect it. For my education." Melanie sighed like I was being difficult. "Rachel, you've always been practical. Maybe a trade school? Something hands-on? The world tilted. All the silence I'd been swallowing for years swelled into my chest like a wave. But I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I stood up. I walked upstairs. My room was exactly the way Melanie had curated it, neat, colorless, impersonal. I pulled out the notebook where I'd kept Mom's photo tucked between the pages. She was smiling, her arms around me, flower on her cheek. I folded my diploma in half and slid it in with the photo. I packed slowly. A few changes of clothes, a toothbrush, a hoodie that still smelled faintly of lavender from Nana's house. I zipped the bag and looked around one last time. Not because I'd miss it, but because I needed to make peace with the fact that I wouldn't return. Downstairs, no one noticed me walking past. Ashley had switched to a reality show. Dad was sipping coffee. Melanie was texting. Outside, the sun was just beginning to dip, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. Taylor's car pulled up, headlights off. She jumped out and popped the trunk without a word. "You sure?" she asked gently. I nodded. "I'll figure it out." She nodded back and opened the passenger door. As I slid in, my phone buzzed. A voicemail. I pressed play. "Sweetheart, it's Nana. I heard from someone that today's your graduation. I'm sorry I wasn't there. But if you ever need anything at all, you just come see me, okay? The door's always open. I love you." I didn't cry. Not yet. We drove in silence for a while. Taylor dropped me off near a diner on the corner of 6th and Pike. I thanked her, promised to stay in touch. She squeezed my hand and pulled away. I walked into the diner. The lights were too bright. The smell of grease and coffee hit me immediately. A teenager in a visor handed me an application form. I sat at the counter and started filling it out. Name, Rachel Wilson. Availability, evenings, weekends, holidays. Work experience, none. But willing to learn. When it asked for dreams and goals, I left it blank. I didn't know how to write, get out, never go back, start over. The uniform was stiff and smelled faintly of bleach. The black non-slip shoes pinched my heels raw by the end of every shift. But for the first time in a long while, I felt useful. Necessary. I clocked in, grabbed my apron, and slipped into the quiet rhythm of Willow and Sage, pouring water, reciting specials, balancing plates with practiced care. No one there knew who I used to be. Just Rachel. The new girl who moved fast and didn't complain when she got the double section on a Friday night. My first apartment was barely a room. I shared it with Jasmine Lopez, a second-year nursing student who talked in her sleep and never remembered to buy toilet paper. We split the rent, argued over who left dishes in the sink, and took turns killing spiders in the shower. But it was ours. No Melanie, no Ashley, no silence heavy with disappointment. I slept on a futon that folded into a couch during the day. The springs creaked when I shifted too quickly. My alarm went off at 5:30 most mornings. I'd brew cheap coffee in a French press I found at a thrift store and eat toast standing up while reading Craigslist ads for second jobs. Jasmine noticed how tired I was. "You ever think about going back to school?" she asked one night while we were folding laundry. "You're smart, like, scary organized." "I can't afford school," I said, tossing a sock into the wrong pile. "I can barely afford rent." She shrugged. "Community college has night classes. Maybe start there?" The thought stuck with me. That night, I opened my laptop and looked up course listings. The next day, a letter arrived. Handwritten, in looping script I knew by heart. "Dearest Rachel, I hope you're taking care of yourself. Found this in an old drawer. Figured it might help a little. Don't tell your dad. Love always, Nana." Inside was a personal check for $400 and a post-it note that read, "Education is never wasted." I cried at the mailbox. That fall, I enrolled in 2 night classes. Introduction to Business and Financial Literacy. I bought used textbooks online and watched YouTube videos on how to calculate interest rates. I studied on my lunch breaks and during closing shifts, leaning against the dishwasher while quizzing myself on terminology. My life became a cycle of shifts and semesters. Rainy walks to class, flashcards on the bus, coffee with powdered creamer from the break room. Some nights, I came home and collapsed onto the futon with my shoes still on. And yet, I loved it. There was something about sitting in a classroom again, about learning things that felt like tools instead of punishments. Business made sense to me. Structure, strategy, systems. I saw them everywhere, in the way our manager organized the seating chart, in how invoices got processed, in why we ran out of napkins every Thursday. Mr. Bennett, our floor supervisor at Willow and Sage, noticed too. One evening, after watching me train a new hire on table rotations, he said, "You ever think about management?" I laughed. Me? I still mess up coffee orders. He shrugged. Sure, but you fix them fast. And the team listens when you talk. The encouragement lit something in me. I started paying attention to more than just tips, tracking which dishes sold best on rainy days, watching how weekend crowds behaved, noticing the way certain staff handled pressure. Meanwhile, Ashley's life played out online like a glossy magazine. She posted photos of brunches in trendy cafes, of her new Jeep with a bow on top. Her captions dripped with fake humility. Mom and Dad got me this just for midterms. Hope I make them proud. One afternoon, she messaged me. Still flipping burgers? I just got into state. Full ride. We're going to Europe for spring. Hope you're enjoying the view from your diner window? I stared at the message. I didn't respond. Just blocked the account and went back to reviewing case studies for my business final. I passed that final with an A-. The next semester, I took 3 classes, then 4. By 2021, I was working full-time, studying part-time, and still balancing rent, groceries, utilities, and sanity. But I was close. So close. My final semester was a blur of paper deadlines, spilled drinks, and closing shifts. Jasmine moved out to live with her boyfriend, so I had the place to myself. I used the extra space to tape flashcards to the walls. The morning of my graduation, I didn't wear a cap and gown. There was no ceremony. Just a PDF that said Bachelor of Business Management, 3.9 GPA. Nana showed up at Willow and Sage that night with a single rose and a chocolate cupcake from a nearby bakery. She hugged me so tightly I almost dropped the water pitcher. "You did it, sweetheart," she whispered. "Your mom would have been proud." We sat at a back booth and shared the cupcake in silence. I didn't need balloons or streamers. That rose meant more than 100 claps in a gymnasium. Later that night, Mr. Bennett called me into his office. I thought maybe he'd caught me sneaking leftover creme brulee. Instead, he sat down and asked, "How would you feel about owning a piece of this place?" Saturday evenings at Willow and Sage always carried a certain magic. Crisp linen napkins, the murmur of weekend chatter, glasses clinking beneath soft lighting. The waterfall wall shimmered gently in the corner, casting flecks of silver across polished marble floors. It was the kind of place people booked months in advance. The kind of place you didn't stumble into. You planned for it. Ashley had planned well. She booked a table for 15 under the name Wilson. Left a special request in the notes. "We'd like Rachel to be our server. It'll be hilarious." Cute. I read the reservation 3 times, then smiled and closed the tab. Let her come. At 6:50 p.m., the host gave me the nod. They're here. I watched from the one-way glass in my office. Ashley walked in first, her red heels clicking with every step. Her dress looked designer, but the confidence behind it was all borrowed. Melanie and Greg trailed behind, both older now, their faces pulled tighter with time. A small crowd of 20-somethings followed. Ashley's friends, judging by their laughter and phones raised for photos. I want the best table, she told the host, loud enough for everyone to hear. Right by the water. She got it. Tucked just behind the cascading stone wall, with golden uplighting and hand-cut crystal water glasses. My staff moved around them like a dance. Quiet, efficient, polished. Not a single spill, not a single mistake. Still, I waited. Ashley craned her neck. "Excuse me," she called. "Where's Rachel?" I asked for my sister. "She works here." I stepped onto the floor, smoothing the lapel of my slate gray blazer. My heels didn't click. They whispered. The hum of the dining room dimmed as I approached. Ashley's face lit up with mock delight. "There she is!" she exclaimed, turning to her friends. "I told you, my sister's a waitress here. Isn't that adorable?" I stopped at the table, calm and collected. "Good evening," I said. "Welcome to Willow and Sage. I won't be serving you tonight." Ashley blinked. "What?" "I'm the general manager," I continued, my voice steady. "And part owner." Silence. Greg looked at his menu like it might offer him an exit strategy. Melanie stiffened, gripping the base of her wine glass. Ashley laughed nervously. "You're kidding. You're, what, playing dress-up now?" Before I could respond, a pair of heels tapped the floor behind me. Nana Evelyn appeared at my side, elegant in navy silk, her purse held neatly under one arm. "She's not playing," she said. "She built this place." Ashley's mouth fell open. Nana turned to Greg. "While you let your wife spend Rachel's college fund on throw pillows and new vacations, I made sure that dream didn't die." Greg opened his mouth, then closed it. Melanie looked like she'd swallowed something bitter. "I put her through school," Nana continued. "Every class, every book, and she worked here the whole time." Ashley's cheeks flamed. "This is ridiculous." Melanie finally found her voice. "You had no right to—" "I had every right," Nana said sharply, "because when none of you showed up, she still kept going. While you ignored her, she became someone." Ashley stood up so quickly her chair screeched. "You think you're better than us now?" I looked at her, not with anger, but with clarity. "No," I said. "I just know who I am." Ashley's hand twitched toward her glass. I saw it coming a second before it happened. She flung the wine across the table. It missed me by inches, splashing onto the white tablecloth like a red signature. I didn't flinch. "Security," I said softly. Two members of my team stepped forward, polite but firm. "Ma'am, we'll need you to leave." Ashley shrieked something about disrespect, about betrayal. Melanie tried to demand a refund. Greg said nothing. They were escorted out quietly, without fanfare. Some guests turned their heads. Most returned to their meals. I stood there for a moment longer, then turned and walked calmly back to my office. There, I reviewed payroll, signed off on inventory, and confirmed a vendor for our spring menu launch. Business as usual. Later that night, as the staff cleaned up and jazz floated gently through the speakers, I sat by the window of my high-rise apartment. A mug of chamomile tea in hand, the city glowing beneath a cloudless sky. My phone buzzed. A message from Ashley. "We need to talk. I've changed. Please." I didn't read the rest. I hit block. Outside, the city kept humming, uncaring and alive. I took a slow sip of tea and let it settle in my chest like peace. Some chapters don't need sequels. They just need a quiet ending. Sometimes the most powerful moment isn't when you stand up and shout. It's when you stay still and don't back down. Watching them leave my restaurant, without a single word from me, was the closure I didn't know I needed. Life has a way of circling back. You may not get justice the way you imagined, but with grace, grit, and a little help from those who love you, you can build something stronger than resentment. A life of your own. If this story touched a part of you, your past, your family, or your quiet strength, I'd be honored to hear it. Feel free to share your thoughts. Sometimes healing begins with simply being heard.